You like that? Hey, this is Ed Parcaut, one of the hosts of Helping the Brave, and I am here with Amy and Nate. And like I said, we are. Don't you like that video? That's a great video. Hey, today is a special day. It is Veterans Day, and we're all veterans. So it's a great day to do this broadcast. It was amazing. I actually did a live earlier today at 11/11/11. You know, like the original Armistice Day, kind of. You know, when they did the original. So it's actually pretty cool. So our guest, do you have anything to say before I get to our guest?
Nope, not at all. It's great.
Amy usually has everything to say. How about you, Nate? Because you don't have anything to say.
No, I would just say happy Veterans Day.
All right. You usually wait to say, and then you say it according to Brian last time. Remember?
Yep.
All right. Let's bring our guest on, Tim Larkin. How you doing, Tim?
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it. I know you're a busy man.
Oh, no, this is awesome. It's a great day to be on, too.
Yeah, it's an excellent day. Couldn't have picked a better day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you, by the way, Amy, you know Tim, right?
We have met at a Steve Sims event.
Yeah,
but
infamous Steve Sims.
Very infamous. All right. So Tim, this is Nate Benninger. He's actually here local with me in Modesto. He is. Don't hold it against him. He's an Air Force guy. So
that's okay.
Yeah. We always need someone to drop us stuff. So
Air Force.
Someone's got to score high. Yeah.
Tim, I'm going to have you kind of tell you. So Helping the Brave, we're here to help vets once you take the uniform off all the way through life kind of stuff. But we always like to know why people pick certain services. What did they do? Their background, kind of how they transition. I know you where you are now and what you do, but kind of let's get that story. So I'm going to move you to the big screen. Okay. Hope you're not shy. I'm just kidding. I know you're not.
There you go. Yeah, I was a Navy brat, so it was pretty easy. I grew up on Navy bases. My dad was a surface warfare officer, so we were all the typical Navy towns we were in. I grew up basically, dad's deployed all the time, and so you live on base. Back then, especially, there's a real base culture with the military, and the only thing I knew was military, meaning all our coaches, like all my coaches were Marines, basically, the Marines that weren't deployed at the time. So they coached all our sports, they introduced us to wrestling, martial arts, everything. So I just thought it was, second nature. I didn't think there was any other option other than, military service. It was just one of those things, we were immersed in it, meaning, we ate at the officers clubs on base. That's like the special day. You ate or you shopped at the commissary. So I was fully immersed in it. So actually, civilian world was kind of a mystery to me, other than going to school and stuff like that. And the culture back then too was a lot more. It's not as much today, but the culture of like base culture and everything was a lot tighter back then. And so again, it was much more. We were much more kind of closed off from the rest of society. So for me, being a Navy kid, it was just a question of what part of the Navy did I want to join. And when I moved to Coronado, California, we lived on NAB Coronado, and the house that we had on Rendova Circle, which is the Navy housing there, literally backed up to the Silver Strand Highway. It was like a chain link fence, and right across the Silver Strand Highway was this huge obstacle course, surrounded by barbed wire. And my brother and I think I was 12 or 13 at the time, and we just figured, oh, great, they made a playground for us. And so we would go over there, we'd sneak in, and we'd jump on this obstacle course, having no idea that it was basic underwater demolition school, and this is where the SEAL teams were. So this is like the early 80s, and we found out there was this job in the Navy where you got to, basically wear really cool sunglasses, run around, get paid to shoot things, blow things up, swim in the water, learn to dive, jump out of airplanes. And we couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe there's actually a job like that. And it's hard to believe because back then, special operations, especially within the military, within the Navy, was really kind of a hush-hush thing. It was early 80s. It's not as it is today where everybody knows about it. Hardly anybody knew about it, back then. And so that was kind of, my goal. My goal was to get into that. And this is where like veterans can really, because every veteran normally has a story of, some sort of a horror story of when they joined up, they thought they were going to do X and they ended up doing Y. And then they go through this whole rigmarole of that. I mean, sometimes you get the perfect deal where you get right into what you want to do. For me, I lucked out. I went to my dad. The only deal I had to make with my dad was I had to go to college. So I got a ROTC scholarship. I went to college. And then I did everything I could to be selected for special warfare. And back then, that was like the redheaded stepchildren of the Navy. Nobody, especially if you're a scholarship student, nobody wanted you to go to special warfare. They just thought it was a dead end path. But I couldn't, it's the only job I could think of that I'd want to do. And I did. I flew through everything. It was great. I knew everything about training there was. I got selected. I got 1 of 2 slots. 2,500 guys were going up for 2 slots, for the officers' slots, and I got 1 of the 2. And that's just because of relentless dedication. I knew exactly what I had to do. I had an unfair advantage because of, I grew up, right across from the SEAL teams, and I knew everything there was to know about training and what to do and how to prepare and all that good stuff. But life hands you, just when you think you got everything dialed, life will hand you something. And life handed me an injury. Right 3 weeks before I joined, before I finished BUDS, I had already been selected for SEAL Team 4. That was the hottest team back then. And I ended up getting an injury to my ears, a dive injury, a really bad one, where I went into vertigo underwater and everything. It basically ruined my ability to pressurize dive. So my career was over before it started in special warfare. They kept me in special warfare, but they sent me to intelligence school. And that's where everything changed for me. And for me, I got assigned to a command that I had no business being at. I was a young officer, young intel officer at the admiral for the SEAL Teams command, the new command that they had. And my career took this twist where I thought everything was over at 20. I was 21 years old, and I thought everything was over at that point. I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna be stuck. I'm never gonna do anything. All my friends were going off, and they're finishing off their training and getting their tridents, and I was just like, this is gonna suck. What was really interesting was doors opened up that never would have been opened up to me if I went in a traditional career. It was when the military was going purple, and it was really interesting. So I got to see a lot of things, and where this is relevant to veterans.
For people, Tim, I'm sorry, but for people who don't know what purple is,
basically back before the Panama, which I was involved in, we all were separate. All the militaries were separate. And we didn't talk to each other. Our comms were different. Our equipment was different. And it was just, Panama was where everything was shown to be what a disaster can be when you can't talk to the Air Force. Air Force doesn't know you exist down here. The Army's over here doing something else. And particularly for the SEAL teams, at that point, it was the most people we had lost prior to Vietnam. We lost 7 guys in one day. And we lost 4 of those guys because we could not call in medical to come get them. Our comms weren't talking to each other. Because of that event, quick sidebar, what's really interesting, I told everybody I just got injured, right? And I lost my slot to SEAL Team 4. Well, the guy behind me that got it, super competitive, and he's a good friend of mine, a guy named John Connor. He got the slot. He got my slot. He also was the first person killed on Patia Airfield on there. It was jarring for me because I had to make that report to the admiral, as I'm getting real-time intelligence on what's going on and where we're going in. The first killed in action was John Connor. And that was just jarring to me. But the result of that was the fact that they said, listen, this is not going to happen again. And then I was there at the inception of the U.S. SOCOM. And the idea of that was bringing everybody together, and they called it purple. Meaning instead of us being, Army green, Navy blue, Marines red, Air Force, I think it's sky blue for Air Force. Something really periwinkle. Something like that.
Periwinkle. We can go with periwinkle. Yeah, it's classy.
We mixed all the colors together, and we were there. And what was amazing was, as much as I joked like I did just now, you end up having tremendous respect for everybody else. You realize, as good as you think your group is, when you go and see other really highly dedicated people who know their stuff, and the interaction between each other is really, really cool. In the special operations community, it absolutely was a game changer. And I was there at the inception of that, and I get to really liaison with a lot of other groups that I normally wouldn't have been able to do it if we were in the traditional, hey, Navy only talks to Navy, we don't talk to anybody else. So it was really interesting. And where that helped me later on was the fact that I had to learn how to communicate with different groups, and I had to be able to convey what was important to us and what our needs were, and how we could be helpful to somebody else in there. I think what a lot of veterans do, I'm just going to jump into this because it's my big thing. I think we dismiss the skill sets that you can learn that are going to be useful to you once you get out. One of the opportunities you have in the military, and for anybody that's still that's listening to this, before the transition, there's opportunities to learn about how things work within the military. The example I always like to give is the one where my guys, when I was in my intel role, I also had some active duty operators and people like that worked with me. And oftentimes they needed gear. And we were notoriously terrible, special operations community, for filling out requisitions correctly and stuff like that. So I realized there was an opportunity. I went down to supply. I went to the chiefs. Back then in the Navy, it was all the Filipino mafia. So it's all Filipino, chiefs that were down there. I went down, I found out what they liked, what kind of coffee they drank, stuff like that. I sat down and I said, hey, chief, if I put this together, I said, when I'm filling this paper, I just don't want you guys to have any hassles. I said, I just want to, how do you like it filled out? What do you like this for? If I wanted to say, I don't know, we wanted to go do Nordic skiing in Norway for that, cold weather gear stuff. If we want to do something like that, chief, how would we fill that out? So I would get like everything taken care of, mainly because I learned in supply, half the time the requisitions and stuff they get is all screwed up, and they spend a good amount of their time just correcting bad info. Now it's a lot more streamlined today, but back then that was one opportunity that I saw, that if I come in with clean paperwork, even if they know I'm pushing it and I'm getting equipment that we really don't need nor deserve probably sometimes, just the fact that I did the paperwork the right way got me what I needed, and they put me through. And they also appreciated that because I saved them time. These are skill sets that you'll find like in the outside world that's there. It's really interesting. There's opportunities you have within the military to actually learn other aspects of how things work. Like at the command, I was just always curious to see, okay, how do these guys get their work done? How does the mobility team, how do they prep all this? The logistics, how do they do stuff like that? What's interesting is I found oftentimes, especially when we're deployed, people have time on their hands sometimes. And if you just engage them in conversations, you're going to end up learning a lot of skill sets that actually translate to the outside world that you can use later. So that's just one aspect that, foreshadowed what I was able to do later in civilian life.
Very cool.
I knew you were an amazing guy, but I just didn't know how amazing. No, I mean, we've talked a little bit, but never. No, what I'm talking about is but your background, and what you went through during what you did is different than a lot of people could have done, right? And you've done a lot from coming out of the military and what you do now. We've had some conversations, but we've not gone in depth with what your background is and what you did in the military. So,
yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I got to do a lot of stuff, that was, we worked, if anybody's watching the Narcos program on Netflix, that was it. We were working Operations Snowcap. And that was part of, in support of the counter narcotics initiative at that time. And it was really interesting. I mean, watching that show, the consultants on that show are really, really good. And it's actually answering some of the questions about some of my other friends from that time frame. We're all, talking to each other all the time going, that's why that didn't happen, because, all this stuff is now released and we can figure out why we couldn't do what we wanted to do back then. So, it's interesting, but I would say the tremendous advantage and also the tremendous challenge that vets have right now is the amount of information available to you, the amount of information to self-educate as far as podcasts and anything that you're interested in. You truly can get the equivalent of a degree in anything that you're interested in just by finding the subject matter experts and listening to them, and then looking at their resources. This is stuff that when we got out, I got out right after Gulf War I in the early 90s. I was in the reserves until mid 90s. And then I did kind of private contract. We kind of had a company that was kind of like Blackwater before Blackwater. And I did a lot of work in Venezuela and South America. But what's interesting is now, why I say it's a detriment, it's almost overwhelming what's available to you. And you have to, a lot of times people get frozen by analysis, The biggest challenge I see with vets, when I work with vets is, and I'm just going straight, I'm not even talking about the challenges that we're talking about with, some of the injuries, the post-traumatic stress syndrome, all of that. And I have, plenty of issues on that. I'm just saying, just a normal veteran that gets through everything without anything major, but now is going to come back and re-enter society. I think we dismiss a lot of what we get in the military, because if you're not aware, meaning where it gets overwhelming for people is you come from this tight community, everything's basically taken care of for you. So all you have to do is focus on your job. You don't have to worry about, are the lights on? You don't have to worry about, hey, who pays the bill for water? Hey, how do we get all these supplies here that we're using? All of that is foreign to us, but we act like it's overwhelming. And it really isn't. It really isn't that big of a deal. It's just skill sets you don't have. And what's interesting is the military puts you in situations where oftentimes you can, what I like to say is a low tech, high concept approach, meaning you can, if you don't have something, you can, find a way around it. Well, that's basically, those skill sets can really serve you very well out in the real world. And it's funny when I counsel young, vets coming out. I have a business. One of my businesses here in Las Vegas is we have a machine gun attraction for tourists. When they come in, and we also have, beyond that, we manufacture all our own weapons, and we also have a tactical training range and another training compound that we use, and that's for some of the military law enforcement stuff that we do, and then also some of our private clients come out and do stuff like that. But the majority of it is, we have veterans that we hire specifically for all those facilities. But the ones that work in the machine gun range, they're dealing with international tourists. They're dealing with all sorts of people, and it's amazing how personable our guys are and girls, how competent they are, and how good they are at customer service. Naturally, with a lot of them, it doesn't take much. You find somebody that has a personality. And oftentimes, even if they're not as technically good as somebody else, and there might be a civilian out there who's technically really well known in the industry, and understands all the exotic weapons, versus a veteran who basically only knows the weapons that they were trained on, but they have tremendous ability to interact with people, and do stuff. And I'll take that person over a technician any day. It's that human nature that you get through the interaction in the military.
Right. And I will say your people are amazing. Because I've been there twice, and they were very personable. My group that was there last time, they said how personal the guy that was taking care of us was. They were shocked how great he was.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Because a lot of times you have those people on a range that are like so focused on just the range, worrying about safety, and they have no being able to, can't even talk to you because they're so focused on the safety part. They can't deal with the rest of it. And it was amazing how they dealt with safety and everything at the same time, and they took it really well. So great job there.
Yeah. And what I try to do is, listen, everybody understands it's a business. My guys all understand it's a business, but we also try to bring the best aspects of the military that still exist, in the civilian world with that. We still have the camaraderie. We still have the ability to have the sense of humor. Like, the other thing when I hire is I want to make sure that it's hard to hire somebody that doesn't understand the veteran culture. We got a couple people that can blend in, but that the sense of humor is great and awesome, very raw, and the exchanges and the work ethic is also, for the most part, the work ethic's through the roof. You have some guys that don't cut it, that are late, just like in anything, but the majority of the kids that we hire are just outstanding, and they're great. And What I like about it is I use my job. Maybe they're not going to do this the rest of their life. Some of them are. Some are just understand weapons and they love it. And they, there's all different avenues they can take, that way if they want to. But others, for me, what I try to do with them, I go, hey, this is a great opportunity for you to learn customer service, for you to learn human nature, how to interact. It's a great opportunity for you to understand sales, how sales work and stuff like that, because all those skill sets are what are absolutely needed right now, out there. And there's huge opportunities right now, as everybody can see, that if you're really looking for something and you're really looking for an opportunity right now to start, I'm telling you, there's no better time. People are desperate to hire right now because of the situation with, all the stimulus checks and all of that. There's tons of jobs out there that, yes, you may start at a lower level, but it gives you an opportunity to get in an industry that would be much tougher to get in during normal times because they need people and they are willing to work with you. So that's a very huge positive. The negative is, for most of us, is the one thing the military doesn't do very well is help us with, the reason you have this podcast, that transition. I can't tell you how many stories I know of kids literally that were on the sandbox. 24 hours later, they're processed out and they're back on the streets of the U.S. just going, what the hell just happened? With very little, assistance on anything like that. And a lot of groups, like your group and stuff are trying to address that, but it's still a huge problem. As much as positive as my place was, is at Machine Guns Vegas, when we've been open for 10 years now, and 2 years into it, I had two of my former Marines. They took their lives within 2 weeks. It was our first experience with the problem, the PTSD problem, the lack of treatment that we had. And what's so interesting is both of these guys were our most popular RSOs, our most popular range officers. They were so positive, so great, so good, but they both survived Fallujah. One of the guys ended up having a breakup with his girlfriend or something like that. That was enough to trigger things to where, he took his own life. We kind of got in there. We got some counseling for everybody, but we weren't taking it as, it was not that we weren't taking it serious. We didn't realize what we were dealing with. And then 2 weeks later, the other kids found, and in his apartment, he had his friend's memorial card up. And that's where he took his life within it. And that's when we knew we had a problem. And that's when I really started researching, okay, how do we get help? How can we help everybody once they're in, once they come and work for us, if they need anything, we've got some really great, military counselors with military experience, which I think is the key. They understand, my wife's in law enforcement. My wife is a deputy chief now with Metro, and she's got a lot of street time. She's been involved in couple of different shootings. She's highly decorated and stuff. And she understands that aspect of it too. So it's interesting that the melding that I'm able to do with the law enforcement side and my military side to bring help to these people is key. And there are a lot of employers that are very sensitive to that and they're helping it out. But I understand, I truly understand. I literally had no idea when I got out what the hell I wanted to do. I was supposed to go to Wall Street. I actually had a decent degree. I had a buddy that was going to get me in. I told myself, hey man, I'm taking 6 months off. I'm going to take 6 months off and just kind of figure it out. I had been doing the hand-to-hand combat stuff that I do now. I'd introduced that system. I found the instructor and introduced that system into the SEAL teams, and it got officially, entered in. It was the official system. They got, the course numbers and everything in the education process. And I was an assistant instructor during that time. But as soon as I got out of the military, I could go full time. I could do that. I could help him out because he was expanding. We were going to Fort Bragg. We were going all over the place to start doing that. So I helped him out for what I thought was going to be like a couple of months, and it ended up being 12 years. And we literally traveled the world, and I ended up, doing hand-to-hand combat. Here I am, a guy that has an international business degree. I had an opportunity to go Goldman Sachs, and all my friends that were at Goldman Sachs were making incredible money, but they're all miserable. I mean, they loved what I did, and I couldn't explain it because I wasn't making much money at all at the time. But I knew if I put the time in, I was going to learn a lot. I was not going to learn a lot, not only from the instructor that I had, but I was going to learn about, we had the one thing that was interesting was, and the main reason I did this and kept doing it for this time was the people I could meet. I met people, celebrities, titans of business, sports people who all came and trained with us because of the units that we trained. We then trained them, and I got access to worlds I never would have got into. And to this day, I have like amazing contacts that way because I went the unusual path. But it was something that I really enjoyed. But money wasn't the most important thing to me at that time. It was really kind of mastery, and not just mastery of the system, which of course I believe in. It was really important to me, especially when I was starting out. I wanted to master, the idea of interacting with people. I wanted to prove to myself that I can train a soccer mom as easily as I can train the most highly trained operator. And I can also convey the same information to all the traders on the Merc exchange. I can tell them why the mindset that we're using. Now, this is all pre 9/11. And then after 9/11, it went crazy after that. But pre 9/11, I was training everything and using hand-to-hand combat as a way people could really sharpen their minds, for a lot of these high pressure jobs that they have. Because the idea was, I saw this correlation. I said, well, listen, there's nothing more, there's no danger. There's nothing more dangerous than a life or death situation and how you think in a life or death. And what's interesting is if you take that life or death decision-making and you put it into something that doesn't involve life and death, it makes it even easier to make better decisions there. Stay on track, how you do things. And we talked about cause state and effect state. And what was interesting was I got also feedback from like these brilliant people who would just come and you just wanted to help you. They thought your subject was interesting. I mean, hand-to-hand combat, I had top doctors. We had guys help us map the human body on, injury and what you get. People just offer stuff to us that was just incredible. And it was all because we just wanted to serve. We wanted to go out there and we were really passionate about this. No, it's a weird thing. Now, granted, I happen to use something that is kind of militaristic. It was, some form of combat sports, martial arts, specifically for a very extreme circumstance. But I saw an opportunity in the way the public responded to it. And what was interesting was prior to 9/11, I knew, a lot of the civilian population isn't going to be ready for this. But, we had enough professional clients that absolutely were. And we were working with them. And then after 9/11, it was amazing. The public completely changed their perception on, how they looked at the tool of violence. And I was able to then, really focus, 75% of my time training civilians, which was just amazing. And it was really a big change for me and how I develop people. So, military is, your military career is what you make of it. And it's a huge bureaucracy that can be a tremendous source for you, but you've got to network. You've got to do that uncomfortable thing and ask questions. You've got to actually, ask why in a polite way, not screwing around your chain of command or anything like that, but it's just say, hey, on off-duty time, you spend a little time in some other area that you kind of find interesting, and you learn something. And what's weird is people, if they see you have a little bit of initiative, and you ask the right question, they're going to give you a chance, or they're going to think of you when an opportunity comes up. I can't tell you how many times I would just help out in a situation like a chief was, and here I'm a young officer, so I technically outranked a lot of these senior enlisted, but the senior enlisted were the ones that had all the knowledge. And so I just do stuff for them, hang out and learn and just let them, school me on whatever their subject was. And it was great. So there's lots of opportunities within the military to find, some really good skill sets if you're willing to look at it. You're not just going to cruise through your time. It's weird. I'm surprised how many people don't take advantage of that. And again, I think I had an unfair advantage because I was a Navy kid. So I was already this obnoxious Navy kid that would go everywhere on base anyways and talk to people. So I think I just brought that into my career. But if I would encourage anybody, if you've still got some time left and you're thinking about your transition, use the time you have left to see what opportunities are within. If you have a certain skill set that you're interested in and maybe doing on the outside, instead of reading everything on the outside, find a version of that skill set that's being used in the military and start talking to the people that are doing it right now. And, you might be surprised, what you can get. You might be surprised on opportunities for education. And you might find there's starting to be a lot more apprentice opportunities, apprenticeship opportunities where you get paid to learn a new skill set. It's weird. I took with Steve. I took Steve Sims, the person that Amy and I know. I went on one.
We all know him, except for Nate.
To Tesla, to one of the Tesla factories, one of the gigafactories. And what was really interesting was the robotics that was available there, and the pay was amazing. But I was talking to a couple of the guys and said, yeah, we'd like to actually train a lot of veterans, because he said they're much easier to train. They get it faster, what's going on. But they go, yeah, but it's kind of hard. We're not really sure the best way to find them. And it was interesting. It was an interesting conversation. So there's opportunities out there right now. And I would say if you're getting out anytime in the next year or so, you have a job market that's going to be so open. There's so many opportunities that I just think it's going to be really good. I think veterans will fill those opportunities too, because they're not going to look at a gift horse in the mouth. They're not going to keep wanting to just rely on stimulus checks or somebody giving them a check or something.
No, they want to work.
Yeah.
I think Amy has a question up there. I think she raised her hand.
I did. I'm in school. I was going to say, really appreciate your stories. They're riveting. I could listen to you all day. But but we do also ask a question. Is there anything in the military that you would tell veterans not to do or leave in the military?
Okay, so yeah, so there's two things that I think you have to realize. It's funny. I was talking to a guy named Mike Glover. I don't know if you guys know who he is, but he owns a company called Fieldcraft Survival. And really, really interesting conversation. He and I were just having, last week. And I complimented him because, he comes from like the most extreme part of the special operations community. He's a counterinsurgency expert, went and worked with the CIA. Just, he can go in the weeds as much as possible, but he chooses to not do that, not to intimidate his civilian clients. He's actually empower them and say, hey, this is why you need this information. And he teaches people on preparedness, but not crazy stuff, just really straightforward. Here's medical, here's how to become a self-reliant person in your house. And he does it in a way that is so engaging and matter of fact. He could easily go on the weeds and show off his skill set and intimidate the crap out of people. And he doesn't. When you get out of the military, nomenclature, all that other stuff, you should try to minimize, using that type of terminology. You always want to convey clarity when you're talking to a potential employer or a civilian client or somebody that you don't want them to rely on knowing. Like you corrected me when I was saying purple. And I'm making the assumption, everybody knows what purple is because it's the veteran community, but no, it's a dumb assumption. I even made it just now. So there's that aspect of it. The other thing is you're not going to find the community that you come from. You're not going to, even if it annoys you, you're still coming from a community. You're still coming from a group that supports itself and supports the mission and supports what you're doing. You're not going to have much of that at all in the civilian world. You're not going to have, my father told me when I got in, he said, hey, listen, he goes, you're going to meet in the military. There's 5% of the population that you're going to meet that are outstanding. He goes, dedicated. He goes, just absolute, just amazing people that you will never, ever meet in the civilian world. You'll only meet them here. And he was absolutely right about that. There's just certain levels of people that you meet in the military, dedication, everything, and commitment to mission that are just outstanding. And in the civilian world, you're not there. Now, we also know in the military, my dad also said, he goes, unfortunately, you're not going to get to spend as much time as you want with them because you have to deal with the bottom 20% that are just going to keep you so busy. And he was fairly right on that too. But for us, Amy, I would say the idea of rank, Mike and I were talking about that, he was a command sergeant major when he was in. And he goes, if I had come out as command sergeant major Glover and tried to approach the civilians the way I approached, my thing, he goes, nobody would listen to me. He goes, I wouldn't have anybody. He goes, but I came as Mike. And I came out and I go, hey, I have some information. I didn't tell them what to do. I shared information. They could take and not take what they wanted. realize that even if you're going to be correct in the way that you're talking about a certain subject or a certain skill set, oftentimes the civilian world, they don't need all of that. They're only looking for one small part of it. And you can give them that. And then once they have that, you then can suggest follow-up for that. A lot of times I see a lot of the veterans get frustrated because things are done wrong. Wrong. What would they say? What's right in the military is right. In the civilian world, what's right is whatever, makes the business successful. And I don't mean in an unethical way, but I'll give you a perfect example in our business. My armorers, especially these military armorers, when they come and they come to apply for a job with us, they have to get over it real quick, because for us these weapons are commodities. We know literally how long each one is going to last us. We know, down to the bullet, when these barrels are going to go. And for us, we're just switching stuff out all the time. We're just going through it. Whereas, in the military, you preserve your weapon, you really take good care of it. Us, within 6 months, we will go through weapons that any other collector, if you had it as your weapons, you would be able to pass those on to your great grandchild, and we'll trash them in 6 months with how many tourists we have coming through. And so there was a change that the guys had to get there, and they were fine with it once they're there, and they do that. But had they applied their military armor skills and standards, it would never work in the commercial world where we're at. And that's it. It's also up to us, as an employer, to make sure that we let people know that, and we go there. But I would say, I keep saying this, because I do think it's the most positive thing. I can't think of a better time for a vet to be entering into the workforce right now. There's so many opportunities, even though people are so, worried about the current state of us and the social unrest and everything else. The opportunities for jobs are just through the roof, and in a variety of places, not just in one section, and not just burger flipping or anything like that. Lots of really good technical jobs are available that you can build a huge career off of. And you can grab one of those jobs now, and within 5 years, you can become a subject matter expert in what you're doing, and you can be really good. I know guys that are getting plumber apprenticeships right now. They're getting welding, and all the really highly technical stuff. It's just, they're basically set for life once they finish up their training.
All right, I'm going to make this even. There we go. Nate, do you have a question?
Yeah, I think you've hit a lot of different subjects. You had networking, you did empowering and exposure and getting to know people. But if you could go back and say, I wish I had known this one thing, what would that one thing be? What would you have done different, or what would that one thing you would tell somebody getting out today to do? That is the hard question, because of course a lot of what I did I ended up where I was at, but it was a very indirect path. I think probably the number one thing was I would have been bolder earlier. And the problem I see with most vets is that we downplay our value. We think, because it's easy to get discouraged once you get out, because basically you can come and I've talked to guys that were highly decorated in the military, highly competent in whatever they did, everything from a highly trained special operations guy, a nuclear sub operator, a fighter pilot. And guess what? The civilian world doesn't really care. If you don't have a skill set, they can't relate to what you're at. The one thing we all have to remember is that, and I had to learn this the hard way, because, I grew up in military culture. But when you realize, I think now it used to be 3%. I think it's half of that. I think it's 1.5% of the population, of our population, serves. That's it. We are an incredibly small part, a very important part, but a very small part. That means the ignorance level on who you are and what you do is massive. And I didn't realize that until I got out, and it's probably about 3 years in that I really realized, they have no idea what the military does. They have no idea what you learn, and what type of things you're exposed to. So I would go with very low expectations on the civilian side as far as them knowing about you, and be pleasantly surprised, because you will find some employers like us that understand, what your skill sets are and what you can do. And there are some great employers that are veteran focused that absolutely understand your skill sets. Others are going to you're going to think they're being dismissive of you and your skill sets or downplaying it. But the real reason is they literally have no concept of the military. They have no idea of what you do, and they have no idea where it's at. So sometimes they hire people on illusion. They have these fantasies about the military that everybody's super disciplined and, they're going to get it right away. And then they're not going to provide, adequate training, and that person's going to fail because, again, the one thing I was very lucky that I was self-reliant in the military. I was in a group, in the special operations community. Even though it was intelligence, it was still, we were kind of lone wolves, and we had to rely on ourselves for a lot of stuff. So I kind of was operating like a civilian within the military, and that was a tremendous advantage for me. But probably one of the biggest things that I did was I didn't take enough risks early on. I could have probably, if I had the confidence, started much earlier down my path for business. Meaning, I had the contact, I just didn't reach out. I thought because, hey, I'm driving a beat up Jeep and I'm not, and this guy is, a really dialed guy, and civilian wise, we're totally different. I'm this ex-military guy, and, I'm kind of, I was kind of like, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to this guy's office, and it's just not going to relate. And that was really stupid, because the guy that really got me on my track was a guy just like that. He was way above me in wealth and where he was. But what I didn't realize was, and this is what a lot of people don't realize, is even if they act like they're, indifferent, they respect the military. They respect what you did. They respect the fact that you served the country and you gave up. It's very foreign to them to think that you would ever, to them, they think you're submitting. They don't understand the difference between voluntarily serving and submitting to authority. We all know that, hey, the reason, we did it is because this is how, in extremists, you have to be able to, know that people are going to carry out orders. And we all agree to that, when we go in. That's tremendously valuable in the civilian world. You can apply that selectively in the civilian world and just go through, meaning you will realize quicker than a lot of the civilians when you got to just say, hey, this job's got to be done. You can look at the situation and go, in order for us to meet this supply chain, goal that we're going, we're here. It's going to take, extra hours to get this done. And oftentimes it's the veterans and the military people that have no problem putting the extra hours in and getting it done. I got some guys right now that I put into a laser sight company. It's a laser, it's laser targeting for dry firing and weapons. And there are two guys that I just knew were really good. Now they didn't have the technical backgrounds that a lot of the engineers had, but they knew the industry, they knew how to talk to people, and they knew how to get things in. These guys are now rock stars in here, whereas they're telling the engineers what to do, they're telling them how to design things, and it's all because it's performance driven and because they understand what it takes to get things out. So I know that's not a very specific takeaway, but I think we all hesitate when we get out. I think we all think it has to be the perfect timing for us to approach somebody, or once I get this degree, or I have to go do this first. If you do that to yourself, you'll shoot yourself in the foot. I probably wasted about 6-7 months, not, waiting for the perfect time to approach something. And there was no perfect time. As a matter of fact, it hit me sideways, when it happened. And I realized that it is an opportunity. I grabbed onto it right away, but I realized that hitting me sideways, it only hit me sideways because I wasn't seeing all the other ways earlier that I could have just walked right in and started doing some of these things. So again, networking is key. Also, get outside your comfort zone. Don't just stay in the same circles. Whatever your interests are, if you have an interest, like, I don't know, if you have an interest in something, you do not have to become a subject matter expert in it. What's wild is, I like one of the stories, and I hate using these hackneyed stories about, leaders, but I will use the one from Steve Jobs, which I thought was really interesting. It's pretty famous. A lot of people know it, but it's to what I'm talking about. He sat in on a class. He would audit classes all the time because he wasn't actually going to school at Stanford. And he audited a class on calligraphy and fonts, like how fonts look and everything. And he got it from one of the top, professors in calligraphy in there, just really esoteric thing. Well, that ended up being the whole way that Apple just delineated itself. It provided fonts, it provided a look, it provided a feel, it gave him the streamline that he was talking about, like the way they designed products and everything. And he wasn't a formally trained designer, but when he understood how clean lines work and how calligraphy worked and everything, he brought that in. So later on, when he had that opportunity, he had this background because he followed something that was of interest to him and he truly learned it. And it ended up getting applied later on into something. So, whenever I'm interested in something like that, I don't go into it with the expectation I'm going to make any money or I'm going to do anything. It's just something that I'm intellectually curious about. And what's funny is it does sometimes quickly or sometimes a couple of years down the road reappear in something that you actually can end up, monetizing or being able to be part of a project that you wouldn't have been able to be part of because you wouldn't have had that, that knowledge base. And I think people I think if you can come out and just be curious, intellectually curious, that it's such a lost art. And also talking to people, like the other thing too is face-to-face talking, texting. I've got more by showing up in person to meet with people, obviously you set it up, but I would oftentimes, when I was doing some of my initial civilian work, I would fly across country to meet with somebody, even though economically and everything, it made no sense whatsoever. I could have done a phone call, but there was something about just meeting face to face. When you're there, you can pick up all the nuances and you do that stuff. If you show up to apply for something, make that extra, that extra opportunity to get in front of somebody and just say, hey, I want to thank you for the opportunity. I know you got a lot of people that you're looking at here. I just want to tell you a little bit more about myself and, what my background is and why why this is important to me. And the reason I'm telling you that is nobody does that. Writing a thank you note, just a quick thank you note, after a meeting or something like that. It's such a tremendous advantage. It used to be the norm and it's not anymore. I just taught my son. I have an older son who is now getting into like the copywriting world and he's killing it. He's doing great. He's very coachable. People love him. But he also, what they're blown away by is his attention to detail when it comes to stuff like that. He will thank people. He will get in front of them. He will communicate with them normally. He does not rely just solely on technology. And human communication, if a employer knows that you can present yourself, you look people in the eye, you can represent the company that way, they will take the fact that you don't necessarily have all the skill sets that you need, because they can train you in that stuff. What they can't train is, your ability to communicate and your ability to talk to people and engage people. So that to me also would be something that, I find a lot of the veterans are actually very, very good at communicating and talking, one-on-one with people or in front of people. So take advantage of that.
You can't say a certain let's put it this way. The problem about having people on here that actually get behind the camera all the time, right? They just talk. It's great. It's amazing, right? We normally have guests that get on here and they're like one or two words we get out of them. And you're just, it's amazing. You've been giving us so much information. This is not negative, so don't take it as a negative. I'm just saying it's just the fact that it's amazing that you're giving this information, because one of the things I was just thinking, I was wondering if there's a lot of books about transitioning out of the military, right? And so while you're talking, I was checking. There are, but nobody really knows about them. Right. And so a lot of people want help on it. And you said you help people in your area. Is that just in Las Vegas, or do you?
Yeah, I do stuff at my other company, we do training all over the world. And so, I do, basically self-protection training and we do that all over. So there's that. And then, I have other businesses that I do speaking and groups like that. And I interact with people like Steve Sims and people like that. So I have that a whole other entrepreneur group that I interact with and train with them. And, the information is out there. It really is. And that's why, that was my original point, that the blessing and the curse is it's out there. You might have to look a little bit harder, but what's so interesting is when you find it, I guarantee you there's somebody out there that's written a book or has a podcast that specifically talks about transitioning to what you're interested in. Now, it may not be the military, but when you find it, it'll be like they're speaking to you. With the specific, the questions that you had rolling around in your head, they're answered. I can't tell you how many times I've had a subject that I've been like, God, I don't get this. I need this for this information. The information I was getting from the people that I was asking was subpar. And then I'll just track on to, maybe an interview. I'll hear from somebody, and then I'll go deeper on that. I'll realize, oh, here it is. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And then you can apply it. And the reason I'm just passionate about this is because I get it, man. I know how freaking scary it is to get out of the military. I remember being out going, I remember processing out and then going, oh my God, I'm a civilian, and it's like, it's a shocker, for me, it was like my first, it was like literally being cut out into the world because, as I told you, I was insulated as a Navy kid. So it's really all I knew my whole life. Even in school, I was in ROTC. So I was, there. So truly when I got out at I think I got out active duty. I think I was 26 years old. And, then I stayed on the reserves and stuff, but 26 years old, it's like the first time in my life, like, oh, I guess I got to go shop at Vaughn's. I guess I got to go, do this, it was really interesting. So for me, it was a shell shock. And so I get it, but, all I can tell you is, get help if you need it. If there's issues that way, we haven't talked too much about that other than I gave you my stuff. And I realize it's a real important, and we do a shitty job. We're terrible. We're terrible at what we do. It's embarrassing how we handle a lot of people who really, really do need help. And I'm in no way suggesting that somebody who is dealing with any sort of trauma or post-traumatic stress, you got to take care of all that stuff first, and don't think you can do it yourself, and that's the cool part. For people that are further along that don't have those issues, but they're getting out and they're making transition, a lot of what we talked about today will really help. And for me, it's just the veteran community is such a great community, and I'm so glad to see examples of veteran companies. That's the cool thing about this current group of veterans that's getting out. They're having some really big successes, and it's really nice to see. And I think that should be encouraging for everybody, that they're coming out. I've never seen the country more. You've got a large portion of the country that's behind you, and they want you to succeed. So that's another good thing that you've got going for you. But, you're still going to have to do the work. It's still going to be a little bit lonely. It's going to be scary. And, probably for the first time in your life, you're going to have to think about things that you hadn't had to think about before. Aspects of your life. Doesn't mean you can't do it. It's just different. It's a change. And what's interesting is once you start the process, it becomes easier and easier. And then, you will find your way. It's just, and you've got a tremendous, your veteran background gives you a tremendous advantage as long as you recognize what those advantages are.
And figure out what you want to do, figure out what you love, go forward on that. Because here and there's so much out there now compared to in the 90s. That's kind of what we're talking about, before the internet, right? So now you're just able to Google whatever you want. And the problem is you get so much information that you have to figure out what you want to do and find out that information, where prior to this, we didn't have this kind of information out there. So right now, everybody getting out now has an opportunity to see what they want to do. They can find all that information. They can YouTube it. They can do everything. And it's so much a better time to get out and actually get it. And the country loves our veterans now versus when in the 80s and the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Not that they didn't love them. It just wasn't the same as it is now. So we're all here to help. And that's one of the reasons we do this show, is to help vets find, if you're trying to find something, we're here to help you find that. And really appreciate you coming on the show today, Tim. It's really nice having people on who can really communicate, about that kind of stuff. And I do have one more thing I want to ask you though before we go, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I know you were with Tony Anthony Robbins at one of his events. What were you doing there?
So I've been working with Tony for 10 years. He came as a personal client. He had an issue, and we had a mutual friend, and he came in, and it's funny because I've had to work with a lot of celebrities over the years, and I usually avoid it like the plague. I haven't had pleasant experiences with most of them. And I made it very difficult for him to train with me. Like I didn't really, because I didn't know anything about him. I knew of him. I just didn't, and I had read a couple of his stuff over the years. But I was thinking, oh God, you know, I have this big blowhard and I'm going to have to sit here and he's going to be all self-important. No, I really did. I tell him this all the time. He cracks up. So I made him. I go, well, the only class you can do, I was doing a law enforcement class with undercover narcs, and they're real hardcore dudes. And I'm like, yeah, I'll just tell him this. He won't come. And sure enough, he came. And he came and he did the training. And I got to tell you, it was a pleasant experience. As big a guy as he is, he came. And I told the guys ahead of time, hey, there's guys going to come and join us. You might recognize, you might not. Just don't say anything. Just let them, you know, go with you guys. And everybody played the game. It was fine. You never would have known he was there. There was none of the Tony Robbins that you see on TV or any of that stuff. If he asked a question, it was a relevant question. He took copious notes. He really understood everything. So he then goes through the whole class, and you know the guys are there, and he's working, and no complaints. And this is a guy who every day literally has to have a masseuse work on a true body work person work on him, because he's got an issue with his pituitary gland where he's getting the equivalent of like $2,000 worth of growth hormone shot into his body every day. So his body is constantly, his joints are constantly growing. So the guy's in tremendous pain a lot. And yet he went through this hand-to-hand combat course where we were going for it, and he was fine with it. You know, I could tell he was in pain too at certain points, but never complained. So the thing that hooked me on him was a lot of the cops at the end. He said, hey, Tim, he goes, listen, that was really cool. Can I thank these guys for letting me crash their class? It was, you know, so that's when he said, he went in, he introduced himself to everybody, and they're all like, you know, Tony Robbins. And here's all my hardcore guys, right? 3 of the most hardest, they look like a version of either the Sons of Anarchy and like a bunch of cartel guys, you know, that were hanging out, and they're all starting to tear up and blubber, and they're like, you don't understand, you're the reason I'm a cop, and I read to, you know, Wake the Giant Within, and I'm sitting there going, really? I'm like, God, you know. And so the thing, and again, it's just worth knowing this about him. He said to them, he go, well, have you ever been to one of my events? And I'm like, oh shit, here it goes, the celebrity bullshit. And they go, no, we've never been. He goes, well, listen, I got one coming up in Long Beach. We were in Vegas at the time. He goes, got one coming up in Long Beach a couple of weeks. If you want to go, tell Tim, and I'll make sure you get tickets. That's all he said. And I'm like, oh, great. These guys are going to think he's real, and I'm going to have to deal with this. Oh, man. So sure enough, they came up to me 2 days later and said, hey, dude, can you get me those tickets? We'd really like to go. So I called Tony. He gets me with his assistant, takes care of him, gets some tickets. I don't think anything of it. Because it's like, you know, one of those up with people ones. I think the baseline ticket that I saw was $99. So I'm like, okay, so you gave them 3 $99 tickets, and they can hang out with thousands of other people listening to this stuff. Sure enough, those guys see me about a month later, and they said, thanks so much. That was amazing. Oh my God, thanks so much for getting those tickets for us. And I go, oh, how was it? Was it good? You know, oh, you didn't hear? It was amazing. He goes, they gave us the platinum tickets. They gave these guys $5,000 tickets. They came in, they hung out with Tony the whole time. They were meeting, like, I forgot who it was. Like, I think it was like, you know, one of the big financial guys was there, all these celebrities, all these singers and everything. And these guys were hanging out with all the people that would literally pay him $85,000 a year just to be in one of his groups and stuff. And he just gave it to these guys. No fanfare, no nothing. He just took care of them and never said anything. And he's that way. You know, he's been that way. So what I did for him was, he loved my training. I trained him. I trained all his staff, and we did that. He goes, listen, I'd really like you to share this with my platinum partners, and that's his upper level group. So every year for the last 10 years, I will go wherever the course is. This year it was in Austin, and we train. I bring about 10 of my trainers, and we're training anywhere from 200 to 400 people, depending on, you know, the mix of men and women that are there in self-protection during the week. During this thing, we get a couple hours each day with them and put them through the equivalent of our like 2-day course. And it's just been great. I've met amazing people doing it. And again, you know, that's what we're talking about, the networking. The person who ended up being the intro to Tony Robbins for me was somebody that came to our training, and he was really nervous about our training. He was really nervous about his abilities, and he was nervous about the idea of violence. And we were able to walk him through it. My instructors and I were able to walk him through it. We didn't know who he was or anything. We treated him just like any other client. had no idea that this guy actually was very connected in a lot of other areas and just sang our praises, everywhere. Just because we treated him like a human being, we understood, yeah, we get that this is intimidating information, but listen, we can walk you through this. We're not trying to turn you into a super ninja. Actually, we're trying to give you skill sets to make it really, a much harder thing for violence to come into your life. We want to minimize the chance of violence coming in your life. And we didn't think much of it. And then next thing I know, I get this call from my partner going, "Hey, Tony Robbins just bought everything we have, and you think it's a real Tony Robbins?" And I go, "I don't know, going through." And that's how that came out. Other things too. I trained a lady one time, and she was really an older lady. She's in there. Her husband ended up, or her son ended up being the governor of, where was it? I want to say it was Virginia at the time. And we ended up getting this huge contract to train a bunch of National Guard Special Forces guys out of it, just because she went home and berated him and said, "This guy's amazing. You got to get this group to train your people. You have to have it happen." So you just never know who the hell you're going to meet, and we've never turned anybody away. We've never told somebody, "No, you can't attend our training because you have this physical challenge or that." We sit there and say, "Hey, listen, this is the machine you have. We're going to do everything we can to show you how you can use this to protect yourself. And we're also going to give you really good information to minimize it." And we have that everywhere. Violence cuts across all demographics. And that's what Tony saw, is the fact that it affects everybody. Nobody gets a pass. Rich, poor, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, no matter what your color, race is, ethnicity, gender, it's all an equal opportunity offender. It affects everybody. And so, we try to make it that way. And I think that's what people kind of resonate with, is the fact that, there's some things that draw us all in as humans that we all can relate to, and the idea of somebody forcing you to do something against your will, or oppressing you, or victimizing you or your family, is something that's a universal fear that everybody has, regardless of any of those other issues that we talked about. And, we just like serving that community that way. That's what we like to, we love our client base that way, and we love giving them that information. And, then that all came from my time in the Navy. That all came from my time in the special operations community. The guys I met, for me being injured, I understood. I mean, here I was biggest, fastest, strongest in my class. I was on my way to get the Anchorman, which is the thing you get at Bud's for the #1 guy. And I blew my ears 3 weeks. And then I'm treated like a pariah. And, injury to the human body all of a sudden ends up being, my pathway to meeting all of these incredible people and doing everything. But you couldn't have told me that, a couple of weeks after my injury. I thought it was all over, but you just have to go on. So anybody now, you're making a big change. If you're coming out in the world from your veteran career, that's awesome. This is the next chapter, and you head into a next chapter that, believe me, has far more opportunities than I had when I was coming out during that time. And I'm not trying to compare that to me, but you can talk to other vets too. This is a great time for you to start your new chapter. And so, keep listening to podcasts like this, keep looking for that information. If I think of anything after, I'll send it to you guys, maybe places that other people might find helpful in their transitions. And please, if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to follow up. And if I know a good source for you, I'd be happy to send it your way.
Tim, I could keep you on here for another hour, but unfortunately, we have to go. No, I'm serious. I could talk. You have a lot of knowledge, so we're going to have you come back, and we'll figure out another thing if that's good with you, and talk about a little bit more if that's good. Normally we go for a half hour, but being Veterans Day and with the knowledge you had, I wanted to go a little bit further. So, thank you for so much for being on here. Did anybody else have anything to say before I go?
No, just thank you.
Just thank you.
Thanks, guys.
I agree with Ed.
Well, listen, you guys are doing great work.
Stay right there.
Appreciate it.
Don't go anywhere yet, Tim. All right.
Okay.
Stay right there. All right. And I want to thank everybody for watching today. And if you're watching this after the fact, make sure if you like what we're doing here, just give us a follow. And again, both my hosts, thanks for being here today. And everybody, happy Veterans Day, and thank you for your service.